I always like to start off my presentations by saying I am not the world's foremost authority on anything. Many people have been very generous to me in accolades, but in point of fact, I'm not an authority on anything. I am simply an ordinary man pursuing extraordinary knowledge. I was given a mind and a brain by the God that created me, and consequently I chose a long time ago to use it. As far as I'm concerned, there's a whole world of knowledge which is hidden from most people because most people can't handle the truth. And I wanted to know. That's the difference. Early in life, I decided that I wanted to know the truth about everything I could find out, about everything I could think of. And so I pursued reading and studying and questioning all kinds of authors and writers, and I used to write letters around the world to different corporations. I used to correspond with the Chinese government and the Russian government and all of the secret societies, and it became apparent to me that there's a bigger world out there than what you know. There are things going on out here in the world that the people who run this world from behind the scenes are many things, but stupid is not one of them. They are operating on a very high spiritual level, the people who run this world. And so often in theology, as in most things in life, there are two kinds of facts. There's the kind of fact that you look up and the kind that you make up. And I have always understood the difference. And to ask the right questions is to be halfway to the right answer.
In these days, more than ever, people have trouble digesting, hearing, recognizing, and respecting the truth. And this is not happenstance. There's definitely a reason for this. In fact, many people throughout history have predicted the current state we're in. One of these prophetic people was George Orwell. George Orwell was a man connected to elite societies, and he knew what was coming down the pike. And no, he's far from the only one. I'm referencing him because he's very popular and his work is very well known. But there were many that channeled messages in our literature and movies and ancient scriptures and writings. And much of the ancient scriptures in their truest form were never meant to be taken literally, but a lot of it was coded language with a lot of prophetic symbolism. We're meant to learn spiritual lessons from the same reoccurring theme. Prophetic voices come from time to time and try to warn people of the truth, and most don't listen. So yes, along with a lot of people, Orwell predicted much of what we're seeing today, including references to what we now know are TVs in every room. That's why his works like Animal Farm in 1984 are staples in American literature and resonate so eerily to this day. One of Orwell's quotes read, "Intellectual honesty is a crime in any totalitarian country. But even in England, it is not exactly profitable to speak and write the truth." Another one of Orwell's most famous quotes, "The further a society drifts from the truth, the more it will hate those who speak it." And this is the truth about what's happening in the world today. Many people might think that people who are informed and step up and speak the truth are heralded heroes. That isn't exactly the case today. In an extremely dumbed down, fake society, full of propagandized, miseducated, programmed, and indoctrinated people, truth speakers are actually often ridiculed, dismissed, attacked, and/or written off. Today, there is such a social aversion to free thinking and the truth. Society is confusing moral decay and regression with what they think is modern progression. And those who don't just flow with the programming might get ostracized. This is not normal for us as human beings. This is very socially engineered. Part of the reason why this is going on is because people are so detached from their spiritual side, and we're living in a lower version of ourselves. People are completely calcified, full of toxins, eating bad foods and poisons, believing and watching TV programming And so a lot of people are unaware of the spiritual war that's going on right now. So they don't realize that people are toying around with them, and they're strategically manipulated by their emotions. There's a plan for the moral decay of society, the destruction of family, the obliteration of organic human relations. They don't see the agenda to turn everyone into an androgynous, sexless entity, controlled and programmed to not question or think critically about anything, and instead bandwagon already formulated belief sets and schools of thought. They just want people to work and keep on buying things we don't need, that they program you to want and exist. And sure, to many that may sound like some far-fetched conspiracy, but only to those, albeit the majority, who don't educate themselves with the information left for us in the occult world and institutions of academia. We were told many times in many ways about what's happening now. And for a lot of people, it's not their fault. The systems in which we live are designed to keep us from information. So a lot of people are not learning from the prophetic voices of many of the scholars, philosophers, geniuses, educators, and historians who came before us. They don't want us properly educated, smart, high vibrational, and informed. We don't get to learn from the enlightened people so easily. Most people only know what comes from the mouth of celebrities, politicians, and athletes. And a lot of these people are on leashes. And no, it's not yet in extreme or final stages, but you can see the groundwork for turning humanity into sexless, genderless drones. They do these things kind of slick, but it's really right in our faces now. And of course, this might seem like another far-out conspiracy to people who don't usually expose themselves to esoteric information. But not everybody. No, they're not going to do it in 2 or 3 years. They work on these agendas in long game stages. It's just like revisionism. They inject a little bit at a time in different places. And now, even though hotly contested, certain places are already teaching children that there are 5 genders and that little children can choose their sex.
Spelling, it's about being gender inclusive,
right.
And male is offensive. We've just learned that.
So. Well, no, I don't think they're including that, but they are saying that society has changed and times are changing, and we don't want to be offensive in our language. And they're trying to be non-sexist and non-biased, and that means trying to take the word man out. So instead of man-made, it would be synthetic. So instead of male-man, it would be male-carrier. So there's many ways to go around it. Instead of humanity, you should say people. Man is the word that they're trying to avoid. They're saying that the word man is associated with adult men as opposed to just humanity or humans. So they're trying to avoid the word man. So if we can eliminate that word, then things would be much better and people would be less offended. People agree with Purdue University. And Purdue University found that things need to be updated, and they updated their writing guide to take out these words that apparently are offending certain groups of people.
Okay, so just to make sure I understand the rule, if something offends somebody, even if you've never met that person personally,
right,
you have to change it. So doesn't that mean that a small group of super unhappy people get to control what the rest of us say and think?
Well, perhaps they're ahead of their time. Maybe this is something that is offending a small group, but the group's going to get larger, and times are changing, and our language is dynamic. Webster keeps adding new words in the dictionary, so our language needs to change. And a term that used to be non-offensive, like man-made and male-man, now needs to be changed.
Well, I get that. I guess the question for me is who gets to decide what changes and what doesn't? So, for example, I think I've now decided that the most offensive word in the language is college professor.
Oh.
Okay? Because to me that connotes dumbness and misuse of power and tenure, right? And mediocrity. So maybe I'd like to say no one can use that word ever again in my presence because it offends me. Would that fly? Could I do that? Could I pull it off?
Well, if you have a writing guide, perhaps, and you put that out there and people agree with you, then yeah, maybe that would fly. But Purdue University did find a group that agreed with them, and the university backed them up, and there you have it. They have a writing guide that now is going to teach us how to not offend.
Having a baby used to be a straightforward proposition. You could have a boy or you could have a girl. But now there's a third option. It's called steep civilizational decline. A handful of parents across America are deliberately keeping their children's sex hidden and instead raising so-called theybies. The idea is that only the children themselves should be able to decide whether they are boys or girls, without any of that pesky biological reality getting in the way. It's all very confusing, like a lot of 2018 is. So, of course, we called in our interpreter of all things progressive, our liberal Sherpa, Kathy Aru, founding publisher of Catalina Magazine. She joins us tonight. So, Kathy, goes without saying you're for this, of course.
Yep.
But doesn't this mean if you're going to raise a they-be, how would you be able to change your child's diaper? Because the second you change the diaper, of course, you'd no longer be able to pretend that there was a question about whether this was a boy or a girl. You would know.
Well, it's not about pretending. The parent definitely knows the gender. It's about not necessarily labeling the baby. It's about allowing the baby to decide what gender that baby wants to be when that baby can decide, which is around 4 years old. So from 0 to 4, the baby will not be labeled. The labeling theory will not apply from 0 to 4 years old. The baby will be a they-be, neither a boy nor a girl. Whatever gender that baby chooses to be.
What other profound life decisions do we think people ought to be making at the age of 4? Are there any others?
Well,
whether to get a tattoo, whether to get married, enlisting in the military, voting, drinking vodka, smoking Marlboro Reds. Is there anything else that we think 4-year-olds are ready to decide?
This isn't actually a profound life decision. I mean, biologically, there's nothing really going on from 0 to 4 in that area that affects a person's life. Biologically, the experts say that boys and girls, all genders are alike. The boy's brain, the male brain, might be a little larger. The female's language might be a little bit more advanced.
Okay. No
maybe,
sexism on my show. Hold on. Whoa, slow down. No, here you're out there like
they say maybe
boys' brains are
true.
Larger. And I just want to say that kind of toxic masculinity has no place on this program.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
But that's all they can think of.
The bottom line is... all they could think of, like difference in brain size, difference in genitalia, difference in bone structure, just minor things like minor things like that. Not perhaps, like factually.
Now, Tucker Carlson is being arrogant, dismissive, and obnoxious because that's what he does. But I don't laugh at these things, and nor should you. It's not funny. They merely need things said to test the waters. And when it goes over the airwaves, it becomes less ridiculous each time that it's said. Unbeknownst to most, there's a lot of pervasive occult activity disguised as progressive movements or progressive science. This is going aggressively beyond what used to be referred to as gender dysphoria. This is something else, where they're going after children below the age of 4 years old, encouraging them to make life-altering choices regarding their sexuality and gender. So as they casually attempt to normalize this as just a routine thing to do with children, they're simultaneously normalizing the use of technology and the application of drugs and hormones to permanently genetically alter and complete the transition. And sooner or later, objecting to things like this will be punished with public scorn. And if you don't think so, take a look around. You're being socially engineered and programmed this very moment and conditioned with the expectation of being punished for saying or thinking the wrong things. And I mean wrong in quotes. Wrong not determined by any real moral standard. Right and wrong dictated to people by a powerful group. If this is normalized in the future, human psychology itself will change. You give birth to a boy, you give birth to a girl, doesn't matter. Sex, gender, meaningless concepts. The very connection to higher consciousness and human nature will be almost lost completely. A society of normalized genetic modification. So let's talk about this. No, there is not 5 genders, and there's no sound or factual scientific explanation for that pseudoscience. They make these things up, and people believe it. And there's always emotionally invested groups erected to defend the pseudoscience. There are universal laws, and there are different dimensions. And in this third dimension, there is duality, the positive and the negative, the yin and yang, the masculine and the feminine. And in this dimension, we're meant to vibrate in harmony with that. But if someone comes along and changes all the rules and confuses you, keeping you from recognizing or understanding your own nature and instinct. Then like an android, they can input whatever data into you that they want. Because scores of people have no spiritual knowledge or foundation, and the people are more confused than ever. It's not like they make announcements about this stuff on the news. That's why the average person is very quick to dismiss this sort of thing, because it's just so foreign to what they understand. People don't really know who holds the reins of power. They don't know about the secret societies, secret brotherhoods. They don't know what is going on. And that is why a lot of people told us and tried to warn us. There is an end game to get as many people to be genderless, androgynous entities as possible. And again, yes, this sounds crazy, but only to those who don't really expose themselves to information, which unfortunately is most people. The elites want to do this because they want to manipulate human nature and completely dismantle the family structure. Because in doing so, people are much more easily dominated and controlled. And if you somehow think this is impossible or that they wouldn't do that, I guess you haven't yet learned from the many lessons showing you psychopaths are in control. And yes, they would and are. And no, this isn't me prophesying with my imagination. It's in the playbook that we've been warned about by many people at this point that we can see for ourselves. And because we are such a programmed and controlled fake society, someone who comes along with truth is bound to be maligned for a variety of reasons. People cannot break their mind control. People are mired in the grips of media programming. They're brainwashed by television, political parties, religious affiliations, social groups and movements disguised as progressive entities, and so on. Pardon the expression, but these movements recruit emotional, useful idiots, if you will. People who mean well, but people who have no idea who or what sits at the top of these groups, spearheading them. They're not aware of who subsidizes and popularizes these groups. They don't know what the end game is for an unseen oligarchy. They don't see what they are trying to get out of us and inject into society. That's why they are so successful at destabilizing society. People are well-intentioned, but very easily played by their emotions and things that they think they understand, with things that they can relate to, and consequently fall for the powerful promotion of things that seem progressive and seem good. They want division and confusion for a reason. They want racism. They want gender wars. People are emotionally falling for everything. They want the political wars. And eventually, they're coming to create order out of chaos. Because by and large, we will be asking for it.
There's a whole world of knowledge which is hidden from most people because most people can't handle the truth.
Information is out there, everywhere, but most of us are completely distracted and kept literally drugged and clueless. No one goes beyond this little device right here. People stay trapped in the world presented to them. There are people behind everything popularized and everything presented to you. Now, a very good, reasonable question would be, what makes me this omniscient knower of all things, and why is my opinion the truth and above everybody else's? That is a very reasonable, good question, and the answer to that is, I'm not. I am not the omniscient knower of anything, but simply being smart enough to know that is exactly what allows me to learn and acquire knowledge. When I set myself on a course of learning things, I broke myself down and knew that I didn't know anything. I didn't take anybody's word for anything, took nothing as a given, and I researched everything. And this is what a lot of today's society does not understand because we're so badly programmed. We don't know how to think anymore. The truth doesn't belong to me. The truth just is. And no, you don't have the option to believe it or not. If something's true and checks out as a fact, you must respect it and add it to the things that you know. Let me give you an example of truth versus programming, something very easy to digest because at this point, we all know the real story of Christopher Columbus. Here are the facts. He was not the first to travel to the Americas. There's a lot of historical evidence of ancient African migration and interaction. Lots of it actually, like the Olmec colossal heads, further proving that they ripped out and omitted lots of things in history. Because of all these holes and omissions, many things taught to us simply don't make any sense. While African history is perhaps the most strategically omitted and buried, there is still evidence of many other places coming to the Americas before Columbus. So why was he proclaimed the discoverer of America? Lands that many people throughout history were already aware of, and lands that already had many people living on it. Logically, you cannot discover inhabited land. You can only credit land discovery to land no other human has been to. Instead, what we got was a very Eurocentric telling of history from one perspective. And we got taught a history that wasn't meant to inform anyway. They kind of still taught us things that overlapped and contradicted the Columbus story, but, through programming, most of us just didn't make a fuss about it. He supposedly discovered America, yet it was named after Amerigo Vespucci, and just a whole lot of weird stuff. Some meandering explanations for this were that because Columbus was not an old world hero, because of his many crimes against humanity, Vespucci was more palatable, who also voyaged around the same time. Either way, any deep diver will find that a lot of our recorded history is very edited, with many things just not adding up. Anyway, another fact, a terrible one. Columbus allowed his men to rape the little Arawak children. He oversaw everything and made the children sex slaves. And they most likely experienced a trauma they had never experienced in their lives. Because they were an innocent people, they weren't used to that sort of psychotic cruelty and sexual deviancy. It wasn't who they were as a people. This was horrendous, demonic activity, and they knew this. And still the Catholic Church claimed him, and he was still characterized to us as a hero. There's even songs about him. He sailed the ocean blue, and there's a Columbus Day. And that's not even the extent of it. It gets worse. He also burned people alive for everyone else to watch. And he did this so he can teach the natives dominance and slavery and fear. Because they didn't have greed like him. They didn't understand what the hell this guy was doing. He wanted gold. And he lied and told Spain that there was plenty when he didn't really know for sure. So when the foraging and prospecting produced low results, he just tortured them more to do the impossible. So the truth is that he was really a criminally insane psychopath. They eventually had to pull the reins on him and his brothers because he literally obliterated populations of people. And again, we had a Columbus Day. Now, this information was always out there. I've read books on this, including one that's very well known, called A People's History of the United States. It was referenced in that movie, Good Will Hunting.
You want to read a real history book, read Howard Zinn's People's History of the United States. That book will fucking knock you on your ass.
Better than Chomsky's Manufacturing Consent? You think that's a good book?
Fucking people baffle me.
It's by Howard Zinn, a researcher, and he put it all in there. And Columbus had journals, and there's all sorts of historical information to verify everything I just said. Yet, what was taught to us in school, well, a lot of this stuff was just omitted. Again, we had a Columbus Day. So a lot of people knew this stuff, but we just didn't really dwell on it. Figured, hey, it was a long time ago. But they've erected lots of heroes for us, strategically overlooking lots of things. For example, Columbus punished people, including many of his own men. By dismemberment, he used Arawak captives for target practice. And the list of atrocities literally go on and on and on. Regardless, one of history's most notorious villains was forged into a hero in our history books. So naturally and eventually, people start to reevaluate who we choose to hold in high regard in history. This is happening with a lot of historical figures. Who were they, really? And sure enough, knowing everything I just told you is fact, there's still a bite back against people who feel we should stop holding him in such high acclaim. People are intellectualizing their pro-Columbus positions, as if there is a pro-Columbus position amongst the civilized. Even Spain, the country he did everything for, jailed him, realizing, yes, this guy is nuts, until King Ferdinand released him. And mind you, there was no international consensus for that decision, or anyone advocating for the several 100,000 people that he killed. We're in a matrix of controlled information in which villains, past and right here in our present, get turned into heroes, and heroes turned into villains. When you step up to defend people who have been so obviously character assassinated, or publicly demote people who were never heroes to begin with, it's going to be met with strong opposition. Why do you think that is? It's because people hate the truth. When people are so used to lies and a false narrative, people don't want to let things go. We're trained and programmed to not respect the truth and not even know the difference between believing things and knowing things. And that is exactly the type of thing I fight on this channel. The ironic thing is, everyone knows that what I'm saying right now is the truth, but nobody sees themselves in this paradigm. It's always those other people. People know that there's always these clusters of people or groups where there's a conditioned mindset where everybody believes the same thing collectively, but the truth is out there. So as you can see, we have a consistent problem in which people can hear the truth, know the truth, and still fight against it. There's a part 2 to this video, and in the second video, I'm going to address a lot of the current events that I have already been addressing, where injustices are happening by the day, and emotional, propagandized people are changing the law, changing what we know as fact and bulldozing what they want by irrational mob rule force. Sometimes they force discussions that need to be had and address things that need to be addressed, but sometimes go too far, sometimes fueled by lies and emotion, with no respect for facts, evidence, or law. I'm going to talk about vaccines, fluoride in the water, preservatives in our food, and many things that are harmful but normalized because Big Brother normalized it, against our best interests. With all these things, people just believe what they're programmed to believe. Well, now's about that predicted time where speaking the truth is revolutionary, and these highly emotional people forcing their way need to be stopped and resisted. Make no mistake, the mobs of spiritually asleep, propagandized people operating all around you in ignorance are of the most dangerous things we face today. With that said, I'll close this video with what Orwell had to say in his own words.
But he left one final warning.
You once claimed that you have an ability to face unpleasant facts. Is that what you've demonstrated in 1984 by drawing an accurate portrait of the future?
I think that allowing for the book being, after all, a parody, something like 1984 could actually happen. This is the direction the world is going in at the present time. In our world, there will be no emotions except fear, rage, triumph, and self-abasement. The sex instinct will be eradicated. We shall abolish the orgasm. There will be no loyalty except loyalty to the party. But always there will be the intoxication of power. Always, at every moment, there will be the thrill of victory, the sensation of trampling on an enemy who is helpless. If you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. The moral to be drawn from this dangerous nightmare situation is a simple one. Don't let it happen.